Hello, my friends. How are you? It's so nice to be here today. I am getting ready to go out. I'm going to that birthday party I decided to go to. And I haven't worn makeup in so long that when I opened up the makeup bag, like my hair is like a mess because I got to try to get this in really quick. But like I opened up my makeup bag from when I was in Sweden, and all my makeup is like destroyed. Like it's been over a month since I think I put on makeup, I guess then. I don't know. You guys might know. But anyways, hi! My name is Natasha. I am the creator and the founder of the Glow Up Method, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. Although I had some ideas in my mind, like, okay, this is what we're going to talk about today. This is what we're going to talk about today. And I've actually completely forgot them at this very moment. And I'm like, TikTok, I literally have enough time to get this done and get out and head out to the party. But I say all that to say, listen, sometimes in life it's about habits and consistency. And so being here and showing up, even though I've got a bunch of weird stuff kind of going on and getting ready and packing and trying to still figure out a hotel. And, again, like I said, this is a big journey for me, and it's a big journey for my son, and so I'm not trying to make it about me. Like, he's going there to do his gaming thing. Like, he's a dude. It's easy. I got my plan. I know what I'm gonna wear. It's nothing too big, but like the length of the trip and a lot of just side factors that like really make it a little extra challenge for me personally. So yeah, I say all that to say, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you for being here. I know that sometimes, like when we're on this journey of evolution, it's not always easy, right? Like change isn't easy. The people around us aren't always receptive. We aren't always receptive. Like I was talking about it yesterday. Like when we go into this life, like we come in, we're like a bowl of pure water, and life starts happening. Traumas happen. Things get thrown in. There's trash in there, and it just sits in there and it starts taking up space, and the clear, beautiful water starts to become muddied. And as we begin working on ourselves again, it's as if we're pouring in fresh water again, and things start bubbling up, right? Like if we had a bunch of ping pong balls in a bowl or some paper or whatever it may be in there, they would start to boil up. And we don't like that. Like I said, I had to go through my own journey, and I'm still not done. Like there's some things that I'm like, I don't have time to go through this process and heal this wound right now. I know you're there. I know you still require attention. I just am not in a space that I'm able to safely navigate it without it having an extreme effect on me. And so there will come a time and a place for everything. Some things come up holistically, again, how I hadn't never made this connection between, driving in a car and having, typically it's a male, jockey in front of you where it's like, you can't get around me, and you're just kind of stuck and you're forced to be in their lane. And for me, that brought up so many emotions where, it was like men had forced their agenda on me, and they didn't care if it inconvenienced me. They didn't know what was going on in my life, nor did they care to ask. They just cared about whatever it is they wanted to do or, achieve. And, sometimes there was an effect on me. Now, whether it was a intentional effect or not, no one knows, but, them. But for me, I know the thing. And so just having that knowledge has given me coping skills. When I find myself in that thing, I just lay way back, move lanes when I can, and just create distance between this person that's creating me some strife and discomfort. And so again, just becoming aware of who you are. It sounds like such a, like it's just so big and it's so ambiguous, and it's like, oh, of course I know who I am, some people may think. But, for me, I can honestly say it was just like, I was so accustomed to living my life from the outside in. I was so accustomed to making sure that people around me were comfortable. It's noble, right? I'm a caregiver. I'm a caretaker. I love people. I'm a helper. I'm a volunteer. And those things are all really amazing attributes. But again, the important thing is to remember you are also a person who needs to be taken care of, and who needs some caregiving to yourself. And even if you're not getting it from the external world because they see you as so strong, or you don't need it, or that isn't the scope of the relationship, and you haven't figured out how to communicate and say, hey, I know, in the past, I've been the one that's done all the caregiving, but I'm changing, things are changing, and sometimes I need it to be caregiven too as well. And so I think that having this space to really realize, and a place where it was like, we put ourselves oftentimes as caregivers, as people who live their lives from the outside in, waiting for all the recognition and waiting for the acceptance and what somebody else's desires are. It's a real challenge to, move past that, because that's all you know. And so, working from the inside out sounds like this like imaginary thing that doesn't exist, and you don't know how to go about it. It's not like, oh, I'm sure there's books on it or podcasts or anything like that, but it's just like, sometimes you just need to sit down and get going on it. And having that alone time that I have had the pleasure of having now, that I do certain things like drive to the gym for a long time. Like before, there was no alone time. I had a kid at my hip 24 hours a day, whoever, was maybe one or another, or maybe multiple, but they were the center of my universe. And, their feelings, their desires, their hurts, their joys really were the determining factor of mine. And it became pretty obvious to me when my daughter was in 7th grade that I basically had no life. Like, I would talk to my Aunt Brenda, I would talk to other people, I would talk to my mom, I'd talk to my sister, I'd talk to my cousin Tiffany. Like, I had like a life. I talked to friends on the fields and stuff like that, but like, there was nothing that was really, when I would talk to them, it would be about the kids. It would be about, what's for dinner. It would be about, the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Like, it would be about all these random things, but never anything that was soulful and connecting to me. That's one of the things I miss the most about my relationship with my Uncle Jerry in particular, and even my Aunt Betty. But my Aunt Betty was always so busy caretaking for everyone. She was this energizer bunny life force. And so rarely did she ever sit and get to talk. I got to know her more, in car rides and growing up, obviously. But she was definitely more of an emailer, a letter writer. She just didn't have the time to sit with somebody. Whereas my uncle was very much, had been, when I was growing up, this really intimidating person. He was like 6'4", like 400 pounds. So, just physically, you're a little kid and you're looking up to this giant, literally. And, if he didn't have the Dr. Pepper he wanted, it was like, roar, he would start screaming at everybody. And now the holidays, everybody was on edge because it wasn't right. And he'd storm off and all these things. And I think over time, because he really was such a philosophical person, that, again, I don't even blame him, because, he had a very, very, very rough and tough, childhood. There was significant abuse from his dad, and he felt like this protector, and I think he also wanted a lot of respect, and the other 3 siblings were like, he was cerebral and philosophical and musical and so smart and really into science fiction, whereas his other siblings were not. They were very like into how their beauty and material things and having a good time. And not to say one or right was wrong, but I think he very much felt like out of place. He didn't feel necessarily connections as deep as he wanted with his siblings, although he always protected them. And I think that, for him, it was this, for, a lot of his childhood, he was this smart, bigger kid. He didn't have a whole heck of a lot of friends, but then they did have like this family that they were neighbors with behind. And eventually, after my grandmother's husband, which was my grandpa, not his husband, but my dad's even dad, but he got in an accident right before Christmas Eve, and a terrible car accident, and he was hospitalized. He was actually hit by a car. And then my Aunt Nina on New Year's Eve of that same year, so like, what is that, a week apart, she ends up getting in a horrific automobile accident, and both of them nearly died. And they're two different hospitals across the city. And, again, so I'm just saying is they had tough lives. Like, he had a very tough life, and he was always very responsible and things like that. But I think his personal frustrations and lack of outlets and support and things like that. Oh, I was telling that whole story because eventually they owned a liquor store and they owned an apartment above, and eventually my entire my grandmother, my grandpa, and the 4 kids all moved into a 1-bedroom apartment. They lost their home and everything because both of them were in the hospital for so long, and it just drained all of their financial resources. And so I think for my uncle, he was really just misunderstood. And then he ended up having great friends. I mean, he had tons of mentors and tons of things like, he, again, went on to, be a part of this thing called the homebrew computer club or something like that. It was in Silicon Valley here in Palo Alto, and Steve Jobs and Wozniak were all there, the Intel guy, like they were all there, all the big guys that were there. And my uncle just wasn't into the material things. He wasn't into selling his patents. He gave them away. He just wasn't into that stuff. He had already been on this voyage where he had like stripped himself of all of his physical belongings, literally like threw them out the car and burned them, and he moved up to Oregon and just started afresh. And he very much had an interesting life and philosophies, and I think a lot of times he was misunderstood, and so, or he was still thought to have believed who he was when he was younger. But as he got older, he definitely got into a lot of meditating, a lot of Zen, a lot of, learning about, all kinds of different points of views and ways of living, and he really changed. But there were times where that bear came out. Like, he was using that left hand as best as he can, but if he got so triggered, it was just like, roar, that anger and the screaming would come out again, and then he would calm himself and then call and be very apologetic, which is where the growth is, right? Because even though we're on these journeys and we're using our left hand at times and we're using our right, and maybe we use them together, it doesn't mean we're going to get it right 100% of the time. Like, we're not perfect people, right? We still are people, and we can only prepare for as much as we can, but it doesn't mean that certain circumstances still don't have an effect on us, and we maybe have a reaction instead of a response for a various number of reasons. And so I think it's really important to give yourself kindness and grace and be like, you're working on this. And as you're beginning to work on it, maybe you find yourself frustrated and angry or really sad because you're like, damn, I didn't want to sit here and think about the bullying I experienced as a middle schooler. I didn't want to sit here and think about maybe the bullying I did as a middle schooler. I didn't want to think about the fact that I was always the last picked. And I didn't want to think about the fact that, I was abused, or I was all these things. And that's normal, right? It's not like, hey, today let's talk about being molested. No, I don't know. I don't think anybody wants to think like that. I mean, I can tell you from my experience, no, but it comes up. And I know that just because I've stuffed it and I've hid it away, so I thought, it's still there. It's still poking at me and wanting my attention and saying, can you please help? Like, I need help. I need help understanding this, and perhaps stuffing it, as a 12-year-old is acceptable in some ways because you don't have the words, or you don't have somebody else to talk about it with, and there's so much shame and guilt and all those other things tied into this that, again, like I a lot of us want to always protect the victim, you see it all the time. Like, somebody does something and then you're like, hey, that really hurt me. And then suddenly they're the one crying and you're consoling them, and they're talking about what, all the stuff that's going on in their life that in a way almost like excuses, defends, and justifies the action. And you're like, wait, okay, yeah. And then you think about it later on, you're like, hold on a second. Like my whole thoughts were just kind of squashed because yours became the priority. And maybe that's just my experience because, I'm a people pleaser. I'm looking from the outside in, but I do believe that that's a common thing that happens. I often see that. And so even when it came time to my own, sexual abuses in my life, there were so many times where I wanted to protect the abuser. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anybody. I, didn't really ever, I didn't ever like say anything, like you knew that was wrong. Like, like you're significantly older than me, So yeah, I never ever said anything. I never did anything. It was just like I wanted to almost like protect them, because if the secret came out, I felt like somehow it would be blamed on me, or either I wasn't going to be believed in the first place, or it would have been something that I did or solicited to have that happen. Like I didn't behave correctly, or I did something. And now that I have, 30 plus years on me since that experience, there was nothing I did or nothing I did wrong. One person did a wrong choice, that was an adult, and those things are not excusable, and I didn't deserve that hurt, but I also don't deserve to have this lifelong sentence of carrying it around and eating at me. And so part of this journey is having to go down that road again, and part of this journey is about having to say, I forgive this person, because at the end of the day, if I sit here with the hatred and disgust and pain, it's taking days and time out of my life. It's still poking at me and hurting me. Like the perpetrator here is still winning. And not that it's a win or lose thing, but for me, I'm not a competitive person, but I'll be damned if you still have a power over me all these years later, when you've maybe even forgot you've done this. Like maybe it's just like, whatever, it's just so normal, or it was so shameful for you, or whatever. I don't know what his experience is with it, but to just sit there and think that I can just not think about it ever and pretend it didn't happen, is it going to have an effect, is false. And I go back to what my grandma always said. My grandma said that cancers come from us holding in things. Like we're holding in resentment, we're holding in anger, we're holding in pain. So she was always a proponent for, like, you got to let it out. Just let it out. And she talked about it, how, my grandpa was like a philanderer. So he had cheated on her multiple times. And finally, she had just had enough. He was alcoholic. After his accident, life got even more challenging. He was hurt, so he couldn't work. I mean, just became more. And she just finally said, enough is enough. And she said, when it happened, she's like, well, my heart was so broken, because he's the love of my life. Even though she remarried my other grandpa, he was still the love of her. My biological grandpa was still the love of her life. And she was broken. And she said, I would sit there and I would cry and cry and cry and cry, and I was so much pain, but then I had to be strong for the kids. And she said, and one day it was like you just opened up the blinds, it just, the light came in, and that was it. Like I was just healed. I let it all out. And it wasn't like I was happy about what happened, but I had accepted what had happened, and it was time to move forward with my life. And so I think about that often, as somebody who, has obviously witnessed 2 people pass away from cancer very close to me. And I've seen many people, like that aren't family, that have battled it and won, and then battled it and lost. And so, I think it's one of those things that I'm like, I can't be perfect, right? Like there's environmental factors, there's genetic factors, there's so many different factors that go into, and we don't exactly know, but I just know for me that that's definitely something that rings true in the back of my mind, that I really would like to be mindful. And I do believe, I think about my aunt, and it's just like any of these, and she had cancer and it was so spread, but she was so stressed out. She was so resentful that very few people, except for me primarily, were stepping up to help her. And she had this family. She had, there were these resources, and she just couldn't fathom it, because she was such a giver. It was Thanksgiving time, and everybody in the care home had food, and she would throw parties. She would get donations. She would do everything she could. It was at Christmas, and she'd come in with a Mrs. Claus outfit on, and every single person in the care home would get a Christmas present. She said, nobody's going presentless on my watch. She'd have luau. She would do all kinds of things. Anybody she knew was in need, she would do what she can. Now, she was frugal as hell, but she would, find resources, call up companies, do all other things, and get whoever needed the needs met. And so what really triggered it for her was she was, at this time, they had no money, and she was going to college, and she lost a $750 book. So I don't even know how much that feels like. I don't know, like back that almost like a $7,000 book to us, like with inflation and all that stuff. But she was devastated, and she was on the bus, and another gal that was in the class was in there and saw her all upset, and she was like, "What's wrong?" And she was like, "I lost this book," and da-da-da. Well, this lady was a Native American, and she's like, "Well, I get my books for free because I'm a Native American, and it's part of the bill or the grant or whatever. I have this book, and what I'll do for you is I will go and I will make photocopies of it for you." And it was like let's say 700 page, it was a big, thick, college textbook. And my Aunt Betty was in tears, and she just said that human kindness, that ability to have somebody give what they could. It wasn't like she was getting her another book or anything, but giving her a book in the way that she could meant so much to her. It just really taught her a life lesson that she, from that very moment, and I'll let you know, the woman's name is Terry, and they were very, very, very good friends until the day she passed away. Terry was there for Betty, and in the way she could, and that meant so much to Betty. That legacy became a lifelong commitment for her, and she made sure that on her watch, that if she was aware, she would help people with resources. Now, she didn't want to do everything for everybody, and what she wanted to do, she would do. And again, like I said, she was frugal, but there were certain things that she would be like, "Okay, we're gonna do this. Like, I'm gonna help this person with this, and kid next door doesn't have school supplies. I'm gonna go get them school supplies." So she was very, very generous and giving, and I think that's part of why when she was in need. And I can relate to this when there's times, like, as a very strong and generous and giving person, when I was in need and there wasn't anyone there, it was almost like a double devastation, because it's like I'm never asking anybody for anything, and I'm explicitly asking and or hinting. I learned how to speak it and not just hint it later on in life, because I realized I was sitting here and just throwing clues and nobody was knowing what I was doing, and then I was getting upset because they didn't understand my clues and cues. So instead, I learned how to use my voice and advocate for myself, and still I would feel this frustration because I'd be like, "Look, I'm telling you, I'm really depressed. I don't have energy. I don't have, I'm telling you, I need extra help today, and I'm not getting it." And that part it just broke my heart. And not even, and then to have those same people like be aware that I'm under this thing, and then compound and add more to it. I was like, you don't even, for me, that's when I would like freak out. I was like, "Oh my gosh, these people don't even love me." And like, I just feel so used, and like, I need a moment too. And so again, I was coming from a very, very unself-care worthy place. And so there was just nothing in the tank. And I talk about that self-care thing, and sometimes we have to think it's like such a big thing. And I remember, like, as I'm sitting here telling you this, there were days when I was like self-care was just literally getting up and brushing my teeth. That's all I had in me. I couldn't do anything more than that. There were days I didn't shower, definitely I told you I didn't make my bed. Like, I would just feel this overwhelming depression. And I was like, I remember like laying on the couch one time, and the kids came down and they were like, "What are you doing? It's like 2 PM. You're in your jammies. It's dark in here." And I was just like, depression hurts. Like, there was this commercial, I think it was like Cymbalta or something like that, and it said depression hurts, Cymbalta. And I was like, depression hurts. Like, I just was so challenged at getting it together. And so I'm really grateful for this journey, because it has given me the opportunity to embrace when I'm feeling down. I've come on here and I'm like, I'm just not feeling it today, but I'm here still, and I'm still showing up, and I've given it myself the opportunity to say, okay, You're allowed to have today to do absolutely nothing. You're allowed today to do whatever, you need to do, but you need to do your steps, or you need to do this. Like, by giving myself some rules and regulations within there has helped me to not just perpetuate it, right? Like, I want to be healthy and I want to be happy. And so I really am mindful, because my uncle was very, very would constantly remind me to be very careful with your words. We don't want to say I don't want depression. Like, we just don't say that. Like, it's just I want to be healthy. Like, like how we can just reframe and rewire our brains to kind of go for the things we want instead of giving more attention to the things that we don't. And so I can tell you for sure, there's been times that you've been through it with me, just in this thing. It's been highs and lows. That's life, right? No one would expect a young kid I would know to get a spinal cord injury. Maybe one can expect that we would get separated. That's not to the realm, but it doesn't mean it doesn't still hurt, right? One may not expect so many different things that have happened and transpired over this last year alone, like the ups and the downs, the joys and the sorrows. But to be able to still confidently navigate that is definitely a blessing. And for those of you who are out there struggling to just simply get out of bed, like, I hear you, I see you, I've been you. And I work really hard to not be you, and not be you, but like to be mean about it, but like to not be in that place again. But it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And if it does, or when it does, I've got tools and skills that I can put into place to get me to the place where I prefer being, where I live the life I'm most proud of. For me, I sometimes rest is a necessity. Sometimes laying on the couch is a necessity, but it doesn't align with the vision of my life. It doesn't align with who I want to be. It doesn't align with the things that bring me peace and balance and joy. And that's where I'm heading towards. And I'm leaving, and I'm growing up from some of those other habits that were not necessarily in my benefit. And so in that process, yes, there's been a lot of change and a lot of things have come up, but keep working at it. As I've, processed, as those things have come up, things kind of slow down, and some more, awakening information comes in, and more things keep bubbling up to the top, and you almost want to give up again, because you're like, no, like, I'm going ahead. Why are these things coming up again now? But you keep going, and things will start to keep coming out. But eventually the waters will be clear again, and it'll be clear to you who you are and what a resilient person you are. All of those little ping pong balls and papers and messes, you have survived 100% of them. You are still here. You are still inspired to be a better version of yourself and to show up better for your relationships, for yourself, for your coworkers, for anybody else, your kids, your significant others, like your pets, whatever it may be. Like, you are here and you're curious and you want to know, how can I live this life I'm proud of? How can I have my kind of glow up from the inside out, where, I'm shining from the inside? And that's the real glow up. That's the real glow. It's not about, having that. Believe me, I would love to have these things, but it's not about having the mansion and the pool and the Ferrari and the, Birkin bag. Like, it's not about all that. Because at the end of the day, you can't take those things with you. And, if you're somebody who is like my aunt's mom, a stroke victim, what is she going to do with a Lambo? What was she going to do? She couldn't drive. She couldn't even get back into her own home because it wasn't safe for her. Like, what are these things going to do for you when you're really confronted with the fragility of life? They're not. What is going to matter, what you are going to take with you, is all those things you've learned in each mindfulness practice you've done, each meditation, each journal entry, each relationship you've cultivated. That, my friends, is where the magic is. That is the beauty of life. So I say all that to say, I gotta go. I'm gonna go watch oh my gosh, what's his name? Something Valens. He's the one that sings Grease and Big Girls Don't Cry. So I'm a big girl, I'm not gonna cry up there, but I'm gonna go. And so thank you so much for tuning in today. Hope you have a wonderful day. Go out there, give somebody a big smile, give them a compliment, and just watch how they glow. So thank you. Bye.